All right. Today we're going to work on the unit circle, which is found in section T-3, part 2 of your book. Our objective is to find coordinates of points on the unit circle. All right. So it says in example 3, finding cosines and sines of angles. So one thing that we need to kind of go back to is that, and I did not mean to move that. One thing we need to go back to is that we need to understand that when you deal with the unit circle, cosine and sine are your ordered pairs. I know that's a horrible circle, but let's just go with it. All right. So the ordered pairs for this unit circle as an ordered pair, it's always cosine, sine. In other words, cosine is always x, sine is always y. So at that ordered pair, this is considered 1, 0. This one is considered 0, 1. This one is -1, 0, and this one is considered 0, -1. Okay, so if we're talking about a 60-degree angle, let's just say we're talking about a 60-degree angle from here, saying that this is 60. If this is 60, then if I come on down, I know that this one is 30. And that's starting to get messy, so I'm just going to draw the triangle over here. So 60, 30, we know this is going to form a right angle, which is 90. Okay, so if I wanted to find the cosine of that, then we have to take a couple of steps, right? So remember, if I'm talking about of that angle 60, and that looks really messy, so I'm just not going to do that. Remember, this is side square root of 3. This one is side, and this one is double the side. All right. Now understand, if we've gone out, these are side itself is just going to be considered 1. Side square root of 3 is going to be considered just the square root of 3. Let me box these in so we don't get confused. And double side is just going to be 2 times 1, which is just 2. So if I want to know the cosine of 60, cosine, remember, again, is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the adjacent side of 60 is 1. The hypotenuse is 2. So cosine of 60 is going to equal 1/2. However, sine of 60 is a little different. Sine, remember, is opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite for 60 is the square root of 3. The hypotenuse, again, is 2. So we have found both the sine and the cosine of 60. All right, what if it's 90 degrees? Now, 90 degrees is very simple to find because 90 degrees would then basically just point out that you are talking about this ordered pair here. Remember that cosine is x, so cosine of 90 is just going to be 0, and then sine of 90 is going to equal 1. And these come directly from this ordered pair here. All right, so let's try the next one. It says, what are the cosine and sine of each angle? All right, so to find the cosine and sine of each angle, again, we need to go ahead and draw our unit circle. So I'm just going to draw that unit circle really quickly, just so that we have an idea of where these points go. So there's one here, 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 and here. This one is 1, 0. This is 0, 1. This is -1, 0. And this is 0, -1. All right, so past that point, if it's 30 degrees, so let's just draw the triangle because we know it's going to be about 30 degrees. So 30 degrees, this is so terrible. This is 30, this is 60, all right? 30 we know matches with the shorter side, which really means that it's 1. 60 matches with the side square root of 3, which is just the square root of 3. And we know the hypotenuse is double the side, which is just 2. So if I want to find the cosine of 30 is going to be adjacent, again, over hypotenuse. So the adjacent side is square root of 3. over 2, which is the hypotenuse. The sine of 30 is the opposite, which is 1 over the hypotenuse, which is 2. So it's sine of 30 equals 1/2. All right. Looking at 360 degrees, that is actually, it goes a full revolution. And so we're then looking at this ordered pair, 1, 0. So the cosine of 360, remember cosine is the x value, so cosine of 360 is 1, and sine of 360 is equal to 0. And the last one, that's 540 degrees. 540 degrees is more than 360. It's more than a full revolution. So to figure out exactly where it is, what we'll do is we'll say 540 minus 360. And that's going to give us 180 degrees. So really 540 is coterminal with 180 degrees, which is perfect because it's coterminal with this ordered pair. So if I want to find cosine of 540, I'm really just looking at the cosine of 180. And so cosine of 540, remember the x value will give you -1. And sine of 540, which is the y value, is going to give you 0. Let's try the next one. So here it says we're going to find exact values of cosine and sine. And honestly, this is no different than what we just did, except these angles aren't as easy, or it's going to feel like it's not as easy, but it still works. All right, so first of all, let's sketch our 120 degrees. 120 degrees is, or negative 120 degrees is going to go the opposite way, right? It's going to go clockwise. So 120 degrees, if this is 90, right, I just need to go an additional 30. So I need to go to here. And whenever you create your right triangle, you always create the right triangle with its bottom on the actual x-axis. So I would create my triangle like this. So if I just went an additional 30 here, then really what's left over is 60 degrees. So I'm going to redraw my triangle right side up, so it makes a little bit more sense to us. So 60 would be that base corner here. This then must be 30, so then I can draw my other side. So I know that this is going to be 1, 2, square root of 3. So to find the cosine, the cosine of negative 120 will be the adjacent over the hypotenuse. The adjacent is 1, the hypotenuse is 2. So the cosine of negative 120 is 1/2. And then the sine of negative 120, remember, is opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite is the square root of 3 over the hypotenuse, which is 2. So that's 3/2. And we've got to be a little more careful here, because the other thing that we have to pay attention to is the fact that when you look, so this would be fine if we were talking about quadrant 1, right? But in this case, whenever you're in quadrant 3, technically both of these angles are negative, right? Because we know that this is the positive quadrant, this is the negative positive quadrant, this is the negative quadrant, and this is the positive negative quadrant. So in this case, our answers for cosine of negative 120 is -1/2, and cosine of sine of negative 120 is -3/2, or negative square root of 3/2. All right, let's look at the next one. For 135 degrees, I'm going to try to make this a little more clear. For 135 degrees, this time we're going back the correct way. So this is 90. To get to 135, that's an additional 45. So we're going to split that right in half. So remember, the triangle has to sit its bottom on the x-axis. So this is actually our triangle right here. Okay. So that if this was 45 degrees, remember I said we went an additional 45 degrees, that means that this angle here is 45 degrees, which is nice. This makes this a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So that means that this is 1 square root of 2. All right. cosine of 135. First of all, we need to remember that cosine in this quadrant is negative. Sine of 135, or sine in this quadrant, is positive, so we're good. So cosine, remember, is adjacent over hypotenuse. That's 1 over the square root of 2. We know we're going to have to rationalize that, so we're going to multiply by the square root of 2 over 2. So this is going to give us negative square root of 2 over 2 as an answer there. Let me kind of separate that. And then sine of 135, again, is going to be just 1 over the square root of 2. But again, doing the exact same work I just showed you, you'll get the square root of 2 over 2 as a final answer there. So the cosine of 135 is negative square root of 2 over 2, and the sine of 135 is the square root of 2 over 2. All right, let's look at our last try. It says, what are the cosine and sine of the angles? So for 330 degrees, that's 30 from 360. That's 30 from 360. So if it's 30 from 360, and we know that this angle is 30, which is all we need to know, right? So that means that this side is 1, 2, square root of 3 when we're trying to create our triangle. Because the base angle, remember, has to be connected here. And also, we need to remember that this quadrant is a negative cosine and a, that's a positive cosine and a negative sine. All right. So when I say cosine, cosine of 330 is going to be equal to adjacent, which is the square root of 3, over the hypotenuse, which is 2. The sine of 330 then is going to be negative, right? So it's negative. The opposite is 1 over the hypotenuse, which is 2, so negative 1/2. All right, the last one is negative 30 degrees. So we're going to go backwards 30 degrees. If we're going back 30 degrees, well, guess what? It's still talking about the same, we're still going to end up talking about the same triangle. So we should get, let me just verify. Yeah, we'll get the exact same information that we got before, because 330 degrees and negative 30 degrees are the exact same angle. So your answers are the same as above. And that's it. All right, guys, if you have any questions, please be sure to come see me for tutoring.